Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and folks, we are broadcasting as usual from inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta, North Fulton, and we have got a fantastic guest today. I've really been looking forward to a chat with Chief Joe Pennino of the Roswell Fire Department. Chief Pennino is going to talk to us about leadership lessons and we can use in our businesses that he's learned in his career in public safety. And you're going to love it. So stay with us as we transition to Chief Pennino here shortly. But just a quick word about Renaissance Bank. If you are tired of the big bank experience, the mega bank experience, if you're tired of chatbots and automated computer voices and all the ways that a lot of banks, sometimes even small banks, don't really want to talk to you, Renaissance has a different way. They answer their own phones. I see it every day at this branch. That's just one example of how they use personal service to deliver their services. And they're big enough to handle pretty much any need you can throw at them as a business. So that's a pretty cool combination. One that a lot of clients I've referred to Renaissance have come back and told me they value. So go to renaissancebank.com, find one of their local offices, check them out, give them a call. I think you'll be glad you did. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And again, now I want to welcome Chief Joe Pennino. Chief Pennino is with the Roswell Fire Department. Chief Pennino, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this. Can I call you Joe?
You may.
I need to shout out your PhD. So we could call you Dr. Pennino.
Dr. Chief Pennino.
I like it. Maybe we'll close that way. How about that?
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about you and your career journey, but let's talk about the Roswell Fire Department.
Yeah.
And talk about what we need to know about the good folks that work with you at the Roswell Fire Department, how you're serving.
Yeah, talking about the Roswell Fire Department is one of my favorite things to do. So I've been the chief for about 3.5 years now, and Roswell Fire Department is an amazing organization with some amazing people, and it's in an interesting time right now because since it transitioned from a volunteer fire department, probably more than 20 years ago, it's been predominantly a part-time fire department. So what that means is the department runs 24 hours a day, but the folks that staff it work full-time for another fire department in the metro Atlanta area. So it could be one of 21 different fire departments where maybe they work a 24-hour shift at Atlanta Fire Department, then they come to Roswell and work a 24-hour shift in a part-time fashion. So they weren't full-time employees with the city of Roswell. So super interesting model that I inherited 3.5 years ago. Problem with it is when you take 21 different departments and you put them all together and you're not training together regularly, and you come from departments with different policies and different equipment, it can be a little bit tough to go to emergency calls and be on the same page because firefighting is absolutely a team sport. So we've started the transition to full-time over the course of the last few years. And there's just some amazing men and women at the Roswell Fire Department. And a lot of the full-time people that we have now had worked for us part-time in the past, and they've come over in a full-time capacity. So it's super exciting, the journey that we're on right now.
I want to dive more into that because you mentioned some drawbacks, but there's some positives to that as well, that shift. And I want to get to that in a second, but I wanted to, before we do that, talk a little bit about you and your journey. Why public safety for you? Why did you get a passion for that work?
Yeah. Growing up, I had a couple family members, cousins actually, in the fire department. So one in Florida and then one in South Bend, Indiana. So I can remember being very young and going up to South Bend and getting a ride on the fire truck. And it's just something that has always interested me, always something that I wanted to do. Firefighting is certainly challenging physically and mentally. You have to be on and ready all the time. So you get to challenge yourself, but you get to help people in their greatest time of need. So there's something very satisfying about that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And you've had experience at a number of different stops along the way that have molded you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got out of high school, I started at the Dunedin Fire Department, which is my hometown near Clearwater, St. Pete, Florida. Worked there for about a day and a half. Edit.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worked there for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then transitioned to the Largo Fire Department, which was bigger, 6 fire stations. Kind of worked there most of my career for 20 years. So I worked my way up from firefighter to firefighter paramedic to lieutenant, which is a company officer on a fire engine. Got into a whole bunch of stuff, just fell in love with the job. Was a SWAT paramedic. So trained with the police department SWAT team, had to go through SWAT school so I could deploy with them on warrant raids and stuff. I was on the extrication team where you cut people out of cars. There was actually a competition that you traveled throughout the country and compete in how well you do that.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And was a flight medic as well. Worked on a helicopter, flying into accident scenes and getting people out of cars and flying them to the trauma center. And then just continued to work my way up through the fire department from company officer to a battalion chief in charge of all the stations on any given shift. And then training chief for a while, worked in training, operations, was the logistics chief, was the emergency management coordinator, finally ended up at the city of Largo as the deputy chief, overseeing all the divisions within the organization before coming up here to Roswell to take the job of fire chief.
Wow. Wow. So talk about what you learned in that journey about leadership. And you saw, like we all do, right? You saw lessons that are good lessons. You saw things that, hey, if I ever become chief, I'm never going to do anything like that, right? You saw the wide gamut of experiences. Just talk about how being in all those different roles molded you.
Yeah, I think my exposure to leadership was at a very young age. My dad had a business, so growing up watching him manage that was my first taste of leadership. And then even when I just started as a firefighter paramedic, as a paramedic, you are in charge of treating a patient. So you have to oversee a crew and give direction to maybe those that are just EMTs or don't have the knowledge that you do. So you have to learn leadership real early. But as you promote through those different levels in an organization, leading as a firefighter paramedic is much different than leading as a fire chief, right? So one is very tactical, very in the moment, do this, do that. It's very hands-on. It's very autocratic in a way. But leading as a fire chief, you're at the 30,000 foot, you're looking years down the road, you're more focused on strategy and influencing organizations instead of specific people. I think as you continue to move up, your aperture kind of opens and you have a broader perspective on how to lead through influence.
Now, one of the things that I know about you is that you emphasize care, clear expectations, teamwork, communication, vision.
Absolutely.
Did I miss anything? Probably a few things, but those are the big ones, right?
Those are the big ones.
Which of those are the hardest to develop in an organization?
So I would say probably vision, right? Because vision is where we're going. I think if you don't have vision, your business, your organization, your people are lost because they're not exactly sure what the end state looks like. They know we're here. They know we show up every day, but the bigger purpose is lost. So I think as a leader, you have to be able to articulate a vision of where you're going, where your business is going, where your organization is going, and why that's important so that your folks can be bought in.
And at the same time here, you've got, and public safety is in this regard, not different than a lot of organizations where you've got team members that are in that moment. They've got specific things they've got to deal with in the moment. And so they're concerned with near-term execution. And near-term execution and vision, it can be hard to get those folks that are looking at the near term to focus on the big picture. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. I think that's where communication comes into play as a leader. You have to show people how their daily execution ties into the bigger vision of the organization. And that's something that a lot of leaders miss out on. So you have the most important people in the organization who are out doing the job every day, and they don't understand how what they do is tied into the overall vision or why what they do is so important. So as a leader, you have to make sure everyone within the organization understands the vision and understands the why behind everything that you do.
Yeah. So you talked about this shift, Joe, from part-time to full-time staffing. That's a big change. Let's talk about managing change.
Sure.
I can't imagine there wasn't some resistance somewhere in some quarters to that change, but it was one that was necessary for the organization, for the growth of the organization, correct?
100%.
Yeah. So talk about just how you handled the change management piece of that.
Change management, absolutely. So that's tough, especially in an organization that has, 225 people in it, all working on different shifts and different locations over 42 square miles, and being able to communicate, because really communication is key when it comes to change management. The first thing I did was spend a lot of time going to the different fire stations and just having conversations and listening, because you have to understand what's important to the folks in your organization, what makes them tick, and what could be seen as a potential threat to them as you start a change, because it's different for everyone. For us, there was a lot of part-time personnel where Roswell was their second income. So if we transition to a full-time department, sure, they could come to Roswell as their full-time job, but they're still losing out on the part-time job that they had.
Sure.
So I think making sure that you understand why the change needs to take place, and then making sure that you can articulate it very clearly to the entire organization. Once you articulate the why, people can see what the desired end state is. They understand. And even if they don't agree, most people will acknowledge, yep, we see the need for it. But then it's continual communication and transparency on every step of the way. What we did was put a 5-year strategic plan together. We had input on it. We had stakeholders, went to the fire stations, allowed them to weigh in on some of their thoughts and opinions of where we wanted to go as an organization. And once we fully baked that 5-year strategic plan, we put it on posters. We broke it down into 1-year increments, goals and objectives with check boxes. And we put it in every fire station. And we've stuck to every goal, every objective of that strategic plan, because people want to know what's next, what's going to happen next. So we put a play-by-play together, and that's something that we have communicated on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis via monthly newsletters. We do monthly Zoom meetings with the entire department. We do weekly emails. Lori, my executive assistant, does a fantastic job of getting me out to the fire stations for lunches. So I think how you manage change is through transparency, a desired end state, showing them the why, and then making sure that you're communicating constantly through many different mediums.
One of the things I heard there was just being available. It's easy for us as leaders to send out the mandates, send out the strategic plans, send out the pithy bromides, the quote of the day or whatever. It's another thing just to be out there and be in front of people and be with people and be with them informally, because that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about going to have lunch, you're talking about just sitting around and informally getting to know each other, and that's powerful.
It is. It humanizes you, right? So as you mentioned, leaders can be seen as this untouchable person that just sends out edicts. But if you get your turnout gear and you put them on a fire truck and you ride on a fire engine for the day, it humanizes who you are as a leader, and it makes you much more relatable. And people get a lot more comfortable with who you are as a person. But as you mentioned, that takes time. It is something that we have to work on as leaders every day. With everything that is vying for our attention, we cannot forget that the people need to come first. That's so important. If we lose touch with that, we can lose our businesses and our organizations.
Chief Joe Pennino is with us, folks. Chief Pennino runs the Roswell Fire Department. And Joe, I want to get back to this shift you made from part-time to full-time staffing, because seems to me there's something going on in that move that's a lesson for all organizations. And that is, yes, you want to create your own culture, which is what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
But you also want to get the benefit of what you learn from others, right? So how do you navigate those two goals that can be somewhat in conflict sometimes?
It can be. I think there's a quote from Simon Sinek that is, leaders don't have to have all the good ideas. They just have to create an environment where the good ideas can happen. And I'm a big proponent of that. I think it was Jack Welch who told the story about manufacturing line when he talked to somebody and said, you had my skill here for my entire career, but you could have had my ideas and my brain power as well. So I'm so big on that. In an organization with 225 people, you can't afford as a leader to not have the ideas that your men and women bring with them every day. So as a leader, you have to have avenues available where people feel comfortable bringing those ideas forward, which means you have to have an organization where people feel safe doing that. I try to get everyone in the organization to debate and argue with me over everything, because as a leader, I know I don't have all the answers. I'm not even the expert in everything. So as leaders, we want to make sure that we have everyone's ideas. Now, I will say as a leader, you have to have your non-negotiables, right? So you have to have your value systems. You have to be clear on what you're for and what you're not for. But as long as it's within those bounds, you have to give freedom to those within the organization and give them some agency on how they do their jobs and how we can be better, because that's how you really maximize your workforce and all the great ideas that they bring every day.
One of the things that strikes me about your organization and the leadership challenges that it presents for you is that you've had to deal with understanding the stress levels, emotional challenges that your employees have, maybe more so than a lot of businesses thought they needed to. And I think the pandemic kind of helped businesses understand they need to pay more attention to this with their employees, it seems to me. And so offer some lessons that in your work that you think could be helpful to businesses in terms of dealing with employees that are under high stress, have emotional challenges, have issues that you need to be paying attention to.
First and foremost, you have to have an environment where people feel comfortable talking about those things, which means as a leader, you have to be comfortable talking about those things. And it has to be the part of the culture and part of the everyday language of your organization, as well as I do that. Mental health, behavioral health is such a stigma behind it over the past 50 years. And we're trying to get out of that. So for us in the fire department, it's a part of day one. When you come into the Roswell Fire Department, we have peer counselors, we have our contract healthcare providers all come to the orientation to start those conversations. Our chaplain, Dory Griggs, right away. And we try to innovate that throughout the organization, whether it is frontline supervisors or even myself as the fire chief, just having continual conversation. And we make sure for us, if we have a stressful call or something that we think could be traumatic for our folks, we'll pull them out of service and we will do a debrief right away. And we will continue to follow up with them over the next 24, 48 hours, week. And we also have places that we can actually send people to off-site for even a month at a time. There's a place in Florida called Shatterproof that we've used. So I think it's for business leaders, it's recognizing that this is something that we need to deal with because we bring our whole selves to work. We don't compartmentalize and say, yeah, I'm dealing with issues at home, but I don't bring those to work. That's impossible. So as a leader, making sure that you're tuned into that, making sure that you have a culture that people are comfortable bringing issues forward, and making sure you're being proactive, that you as a leader are actually having those conversations and checking in on your people.
One of the things that you've talked about in the past is real-time tracking of firefighter fatigue and well-being.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Related question to what you just talked about. And where does that go? What more do you want to see there is the question.
Yeah. So I'm going to tie a couple things together because you talked about how do you take advantage of people's ideas. So one of the ideas that our firefighters came up with is to transition from our typical 24-hour on, 48-hour off work cycle to a 48-hour on, 96-hour off work cycle. It's the same amount of hours in a year, but we actually pushed the start time back from 8 a.m. in the morning to 11 a.m. in the morning. And the theory behind it is we're not going to wake up firefighters with a arbitrary start time. We're not going to get you at 5 o'clock up in the morning to come to work at 8 a.m. and then work you for 24 hours and wake you up again to send you home at 8 a.m., only for you to take 48 hours off and do it all over again. So that was a great idea that really sprang up from our firefighters. And we took that on. We did town hall meetings. We listened to feedback and decided to do a 6-month pilot study. We brought in a couple researchers. We had our firefighters wear wearable devices that track their sleep, track their heart rates. And we actually had their families fill out surveys from before and after of how they feel like their husband and wife were engaged at home, whether they were tired and disengaged or grumpy or well rested. And we've seen great results from that. We have seen an increase in overall total sleep time. We've seen consistency in firefighters' circadian rhythms. We've had firefighters report overall decreases in anxiety, increases in employee engagement, and the same from their family members as well. And in fact, I was just in Washington, D.C. last week, and Roswell was given the Senator Paul Sarbanes Fire Service Safety Leadership Award, which is a national award on the things that we're doing for firefighter health and safety.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's, the benefit, the praise goes to our men and women at the Roswell Fire Department. I think where I would like to see this go in the future is real-time tracking of firefighter fatigue. So there's a lot of things on the market right now, whether it's Apple Watches or Oura Rings or whatever else, that are starting to do that. But what we really need is a comprehensive approach, not only tracking fatigue throughout a shift, but also when we're going into the high stress environments like structure fires, where we can see what their heart rates are doing, we can see what their respiratory rates doing, and we can make the incident commanders more educated on when they should be pulling people out of those environments.
Wow. That's fascinating. But to introduce innovations like that, you have to have high degrees of trust.
That's right.
Because that's getting into pretty personal stuff. The state of their health and wellness.
That's right.
So talk about how you were able to introduce that pilot program to get buy-in from that, and the trust that you had obviously engendered in your team to be able to introduce these innovations.
Yeah, I think talking about innovation, that's our vision for the Roswell Fire Department, is to be an innovative, world-class public safety organization. So innovation's part of what we do. From the trust perspective, I'll just go back to communication and transparency. And as a leader, you have to communicate when things are good, and you also have to be out front when you mess up or your team messes up and you don't have good news. That's how you build trust. When it comes to the study that we did for the 4896 and firefighter health and wellness, I think part of the reason it was successful is because, number one, the idea came from the firefighters themselves, but number two, We did 3 consecutive nights of town hall meetings where we brought everyone together, and I stood in front of them and talked about what we're going to do and why we think it's important and how we were going to make a contribution to the National Fire Service and strive to improve the health and wellness of firefighters across the nation. So I think being present, being in front of your folks, especially when you're trying something as significant as that you mentioned, we're changing people's work times, we're changing their family lives, we're monitoring their health. And I was pleased that we've got 100% buy-in on the pilot study. And part of it is them believing that if I stand in front of them and say, if this doesn't work, we'll roll it back. And them trusting that we will. So every step along the way, as we got preliminary results, when later this year, when we get our full results back, that includes other biometrics like blood work and lab tests, it all gets presented to them, unfettered, raw data, and we talk them through that. So that transparency and that open communication is what builds trust.
And what you just said, embedded in all that about how what you're implying is we don't have all the answers. We're trying to get to a place. We think this is one way to go, and this is what we're going to try. But when you make that admission that we're trying to get answers ourselves and we don't have all the answers, that's a trust builder right there, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the quote on Simon Sinek, I think the first thing you do as a leader is let people know you don't have all the answers, but you'll be transparent, you'll take feedback, and that everybody will have a voice. I think that is one of the main things as a leader that you can do. People don't always need their ideas to take place, but people always want to be heard. And oftentimes that's enough. If people feel like they have a seat at the table, they have agency, they have the ability to provide their opinion and that it's listened to, people will follow and people will buy in. So you have to keep those lines of communication open.
I want to follow up on this word innovation. This is not, I dare say, what a lot of our listeners, they were expecting to hear that word from someone who's running a municipal department, right? People do not associate innovation with government.
Sure.
And talk about embracing innovation, why that's so important for municipalities and government entities, and what in embracing innovation, how you maintain things like transparency and accountability.
Yeah, definitely. So we are fortunate enough to have a mayor and council at the city of Roswell that fully embrace innovation. And as the fire chief, I am challenged to be more innovative every day. So along with this 4896 health and wellness initiatives, there's a couple other things that we're doing as well. We have to build some new fire stations. The voters approved a $52 million bond, but even with $52 million, you realize it didn't get you as far as you'd like it to get you. So we were challenged with, hey, instead of rebuilding fire stations where they are, take a holistic look of the city of Roswell right now where it's fully built out, and where would you put fire stations if you were going to start over? So we brought in a data analyst from Gwinnett County, Alex Thames, a phenomenal guy, super sharp. And he built a novel way using GIS and Esri to model fire station and fire engine response time. So not only from our current fire stations, but actually going into depth and modeling how long it takes a fire engine to stop, how long it takes it to accelerate, left turn, right turn, and then overlaying on top of that, what if we did intelligent traffic preemption, where we could actually change the traffic lights and turn them green. So when we initially had a consultant come in and say, you really need 8 fire stations, you need to add one, based on the modeling that Alex did, we determined that we actually only need 7 if we do this $750,000 investment in traffic preemption, intelligent traffic preemption, which is way cheaper than a $10 million fire station and the people to staff it.
Yeah.
So that's something that was innovative. And we're also working with a company called Quake Technologies, who got a $5 million contract from the Department of Homeland Security. And that is a heads-up display in a helmet. It actually has a monocle that flips down, and it has heads-up display for thermal imaging. And actually, if a firefighter gets lost or disoriented in a fire with no visibility, it will actually give them a heads-up display and directions back to the door that they came in. Likewise, if a firefighter is down and needs help, firefighters who are going to rescue them will get directions and their heads-up display on where to find that firefighter. So to tie that innovation into why that's important, well, on the traffic preemption side, there's an example where a $10 million fire station and the people in the apparatus to staff it is offset by a $750,000 investment in smart innovation. When it comes to the heads-up display in the fire helmets and working with the Department of Homeland Security and Sam Kosman from Quake Technologies, firefighter health and safety. If we can save lives for our firefighters and we can get them to victims within fires faster, that's our responsibility as leaders. Same with the 4896 work schedule. We need to be looking at innovative ideas to keep our folks safe and do right by them. And it's also a return on our taxpayer dollars. We need to be good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars.
Let's talk about just how maybe misconceptions. Maybe that's the way to put it. Misconceptions that folks have about fire department efficiency. I think you've addressed some of these really in a backhanded way, but talk about what either people in government or citizens that you serve have about fire department efficiency.
Yeah, I would think a lot of people think we just go to fires and we sit around and play checkers and we rescue cats out of trees. And that's what we do. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've done recently in the last few years, tonight's actually our kickoff of our third year of our Citizens Fire Academy, is invite citizens in for a 10-week program and show them what we do. So to tie back to innovation, so 80% of our calls are emergency medical services calls. So people that have heart attacks, all of our firefighters are cross-trained as either EMTs or paramedics. And we can do for people who are in cardiac arrest essentially anything an emergency room can do. We carry all the drugs, the pharmaceuticals, defibrillators. We can diagnose heart attacks, and we can get you very quickly. That's probably the majority of what we do. In addition to that, it's obviously the fires, the car accidents, it's rescuing people out of the Chattahoochee River, it's rescuing people out of elevators, escalators, anything and everything people call the fire department for, and we're prepared to handle whatever we roll up on. Outside of that response phase, we do something called community risk reduction. And what that means is we are dedicated to preventing the 911 calls from ever happening. So that's taking a data-driven approach, looking backward and saying, what are the highest calls per volume that we go on? Great example, fire alarms. We run on a lot of fire alarms that are not actual emergencies. And we go on a tremendous amount of ground level falls. It's something about the gravity in North Fulton. We have a lot of ground level falls, especially in our elderly population. So it's looking at those at a very granular scale and saying, why is this happening and what can we do to prevent it, to make sure our citizens never have to call 911? And that is a huge undertaking, using a lot of data analysis to make sure that we can stop the calls from happening and make sure our folks never experience an emergency. I don't think a lot of people understand that we do those kinds of things.
One of the fun facts I know about fire department history is that the number of fires that fire departments get called out on has dropped dramatically over 50 years because of fire safety, fire prevention efforts, which really gets at what you're talking about, right? It is preventing the disaster to begin with. And this is one of the things that the industry has been very successful at.
That's right. Building codes, fire safety codes.
Absolutely.
I will say, although the numbers of fires have declined because of the use of synthetics over the course of the last couple decades, fires burn a lot hotter and they burn a lot faster. So our time to actually get on scene and effect a rescue or get a fire put out, that window has narrowed quite a bit because of all the synthetics and how quickly they burn. And then we get things such as electric vehicle fires and lithium ion batteries. And there are things that fire service is playing catch up on industry and trying to solve for. So there's always something that we are trying to innovate and make safer.
You may have just answered this question, but if there's something else that you want to mention in response, what's the one thing you wish folks knew about the Roswell Fire Department that they don't already know? Maybe a big misconception or something that you're really proud of that you wish folks paid more attention to.
I think it's the breadth and width of what we offer to the community. So it's everything from public education to any emergency that you're facing. You call 911 and we're going to be there in the course of 6 minutes or so to solve whatever emergency you have going on. And that's one of the things that is intriguing about the fire service. It's what drew me into the fire service is at 3 o'clock in the morning, you get woken up for a 911 call. You have no idea what that call's for. It could be a broken sprinkler head. It could be someone's dog stuck in a fence. It could be a child in cardiac arrest. And you have to be ready to wake up, get there in 5 minutes, and solve whatever problem that person has. So I would tell the citizens of Roswell, your Roswell Fire Department's prepared to do that and does it every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And on top of that, it is working every day to prevent those 911 calls from happening. And it's being a national leader in firefighter health and wellness and innovation.
So you're a student of leadership, Joe. You're a leadership disciple. You're a leadership coach. Obviously, you practice leadership every day. You mentioned Simon Sinek. Anybody else that you look at as in which their philosophy is important to you and you play out every day? Book, individual, quote.
If you had to press me into one, it would be probably Lencioni and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That is just a phenomenal book for any leader to read. Anyone that's trying to lead a business or lead an organization, I would start there because it covers a lot of the pitfalls that leaders stumble into, especially new leaders.
Looking forward, what's your leadership legacy going to be?
I think my leadership legacy is going to be, hopefully, teams of people that are coming up behind me that can say that I had a positive influence on them and that they're a better leader for working with me. I think that more than anything is what's important to me is the impact I can have on individuals and their leadership journey. Take that very seriously.
Chief Joe Pennino, Dr. Chief Joe Pennino with the Roswell Fire Department. Chief, this has been quite a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in. I know you've got a very busy schedule, and I'm just very honored that you could come in and share your insights with the audience of the show and with me. So thank you for that.
Thank you, John. It's my pleasure.
Before we let you go, folks that want to know more about the Roswell Fire Department, where do they need to go?
Go to roswellgov.com/fire. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, all that stuff. Roswell GA Fire. You can find us on there.
Terrific. Chief Joe Pennino with the Roswell Fire Department. Chief, thanks again for coming in.
Thank you, John.
Hey, folks, just a couple of quick things before we let you go for today. I have a book out, and it's for you if you are a professional services provider and you sell your expertise and you have issues around your business development, your understanding your value, the value that you offer to your clients, and your pricing. If you have issues around some of those items, then you need to check out my book. It's called The Generosity Mindset, A Journey to Business Success by Raising Your Confidence, Value, and Prices. Go to thegenerositymindset.com to learn more and to learn where to buy the book, which is essentially everywhere. And folks, if you're listening to the show, I just want to thank you because you're supporting us and you have supported us in so many different ways over the years, and I'm grateful for you. this is going to be show number, 835 or something like that we've done over almost 9 years of North Fulton Business Radio. And we've only gotten this far because of you. So thank you as you help us to live into our mission to be the voice of business and the community in the North Fulton region and beyond. Thank you for your support. So for my guest, Chief Joe Pennino, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.